has an interesting history. We built this house in 1978. So the neighborhood, while this is the first house in the new development of an older street. And some of the other homes had been built prior to this because this was the ugliest lot on the street. And the reason for that is where the house is was a big gully. And there was a big gully there because the whole back piece of that property was at one time in the history of this area a pond. So it was a relatively small pond, but it took up the whole backyard area. So when we came looking for property, a friend of ours built a house down the block and we fell in love with the whole concept. Anyway, bought the lot and built the house. So 1, 2, 3 separate gardens. And this was all wooded area. And around the house, not much going on. And then I just started planting things. I'm not what I would consider a super knowledgeable gardener, but if I saw a plant and it was interesting, we would buy it and plant it and see what happened. My overriding theory is if you put a plant in the ground and it thrives, then it likes to be where you put it, and I like to nurture it. If it doesn't thrive, then if I like the plant, I move it to a different part of the yard. So what you see is 43 some odd years of planting, replanting, taking plants that I bought at a church sale, gifts from friends, and then the ferns, that all came from one friend who had them growing around a home that he had just purchased. He didn't like the ferns. So I said, well, if you don't like them, I'll take them. So he delivered a wheelbarrow full of these ferns, and they were a mess. But I planted them anyway. And lo and behold, over the years, from those few ferns, I mean, it was maybe 10 or 15 ferns, we now have what I call a sea of ferns. And this is one of my favorite views of the whole property. That's a red maple, a Japanese maple there that I actually bought. That was originally planted over here, but thanks to my good friend Matt, the pruner, we made a change. The viburnum with the white flowers over there, that was just growing by itself in the woods. So we transplanted that 2 years ago, and this year it's flowering in a spectacular fashion. There's another Japanese maple, a red maple, right there. And that too, that was a seedling that I found in the woods, and I moved it to that spot because it appealed to me. And this is the first year it's gotten big enough to make sort of a difference in the landscape. The rest of this was overtaken by a particular weed that is quite invasive. I call it the what is it, like lily pads, because they get very big leaves, but they're quite invasive. And I can tell you what that one is. So I can't live without, picture this, which is really a plant finder and identifier. So for example, if I want to know what this particular plant is, and I'm not familiar with it, there we go. And in a couple of seconds, I'm going to know exactly what it is. and that's called colt's foot. It's quite invasive, and we are trying to keep it under control. So what we've replaced it with are daffodils. We've got hostas growing, although the deer like the hostas and it's difficult. But we also have bearded iris, which they don't eat. And we keep filling in. My basic philosophy is let it grow, see what it's doing, see if I like it. If I like it, we keep it. And by the way, I have partners in this. This is not just me. We have Matt Villa, the pruner. We have my wife Vivian, who does a tremendous amount of maintenance and weeding and so forth. And it's just great fun and incredibly rewarding work. And it gives us a chance. We're right here on the street and people come walking by from the neighborhood. It's a lovely neighborhood filled with friendly people. This is one of my favorite gardens. I always like to add some whimsy to my gardening if I can, without getting too hokey. But I've been a fan of wagon wheels, and we found these at a roadside antique shop on our way to Red Hook, where my daughter and family live. And so we had it, I had it leaning against some trees, and once again in steps our pruner Matt, and he conspired with my wife Vivian and came up with this idea of putting the wagon wheels where you see them. So, and they take on different character as the plants around them grow. So this whole berm area was really separate berms, again with those big Austrian pines. And ultimately, once we got rid of all the roots and so forth and added topsoil, we just started planting things. There's a hydrangea that I normally love, but after the first year I haven't been able to get it to flower. So I really dosed it heavily with fertilizer this year, and I'm giving it one more chance to flower. After that, it's coming up and going somewhere else. But this whole garden is surrounded by sage. We've got some different types of daylilies. We've got an orange, we've got a bright yellow, we've got a Stella d'Oro, we've got some hostas, we've got some Asian lilies, and I'm looking this year, I had planted those years ago. We just bought some pots of nice looking lilies at the Price Chopper. It grew beautifully for a couple of years and then disappeared for some reason. And now they're back. So we're really anxious to see that. We planted daisies all over the place. They're going to be beautiful Shasta daisies. And they were started as one of the plants I bought at a church garden sale. We also moved in a lot of daffodils, and you see they're pretty much spent. But also recently we moved some things. That's a Rose of Sharon over there. This is a beautiful dogwood, and we have a sweet cherry that's pruned to weep. So to my left is actually the first garden that I attempted, and the way that came about was I got a gift of seed packet, I believe Monet's Garden mix, which included poppies and a bunch of other both perennials and annuals that it was attractive. I didn't know what I was doing. Our soil is very heavy clay. So every one of these gardens that I'm showing you, I've amended with lots and lots and lots of organic matter and topsoil. So that was a lot of schlepping of a lot of dirt. And of course I was much younger in those days, so I could do that. But this started again from nothing. It was nothing but grass. There was no sunroom there, just a deck. And so that's how it all started. Over the years, it kept transforming itself as I got introduced new plants to it. So bearded iris is in that spot right now, and we've really enabled that to thrive a little better. We have a lot of bee balm everywhere, which somebody gave me, and it loves it here and continues to spread here and there. And like everything else, if I like the way it looks where it is, I leave it, I nurture it, I do what I can to help it survive and thrive, and let it go. Also, black-eyed Susans seem to love our yard no matter where I plant them. So it's a little bit early to see what's going on with the black-eyed Susans, but those are going to take over this side of the garden and this side of the garden as well. There's also some milkweed growing here and there, which of course is great for the monarch butterflies. So we get some of that going on. And again, that lilac, it's a miniature lilac, bought that at the Honest Way Food Co-op. It was just a potted plant, and that's been there for more years than I can count. But we've got some hostas growing here and there, and this is a year of discovery for what I call the sunroom garden. While I'm on that subject, you'll notice on our house we have lots of windows, and large windows. My gardening starts from inside the house because I want to make sure that when we look out all these windows, we see something that's attractive and fun to look at. So we have our bird feeders out there, which I fill every day religiously, at least once a day, depending on how much the birds are feeding. We get a chance from my favorite spot in the sunroom to just watch all the various animals. We're home to woodland animals. So this we call the sunroom garden. That is our favorite room in the house. It started out as a screened-in porch and then turned into an all-season, and we combined it to with the rest of the house, and had this lovely deck built. And the whole idea, again, is bring the outside inside and making sure that all the views are fun and interesting. Down there is really, that's the back part of our woodlot. And when we first moved in, we had always done vegetable gardens. We had a little house in Loudonville many years ago before this one. But so that whole, wherever you see the green grass, that was a big vegetable garden that we shared with our neighbor. And we did that for years. Same problem, deer would come through and eat everything. So for the future, I'm planning on doing some sort of a decorative fencing and closing it off to the deer, and just planting some, a kitchen garden, if you will. But you'll notice there's a gully there in between the two properties. And there's actually water that flows, and there's a little creek. Most of it is dried up, but there's a creek that goes along the back of the property. And again, where I'm standing would be, first of all, it's much lower because we backfilled everything, but I would be in the middle of the pond right now. What my plan is for there, I love Monet's gardens, and the vision I have in my head is to build a footbridge with a pond underneath it. You know, it's a debate about when I can do that and how, but that's one of the things. I'm also working on the whole idea of helping that forest and adding some more variety to it. It was originally, you can't see it from here, but there were white pines growing, and it looked like somebody planted them in rows for harvesting as lumber. All of those pines are so old now that they're really at the end of their life cycle, and one at a time they're dying. So our goal is to remove them before they hurt somebody, and then replace them or let the forest regrow itself with native trees. And there's cherry trees, there's maple trees, there's all kinds of wonderful stuff growing. So clearing the woods out, getting rid of all the downed trees that we did last fall, and then we'll see what happens. My core philosophy of all this gardening is let it grow, do an assessment. Do you like it? Does it like where it is? Do you like the look? And how does it interact with the other plants around it? And have fun with it. It's just a lifelong, especially at this stage of our lives. It's a great way for Vivian and I to interact and have a good time with our gardens.